Discover why kindness is the ultimate currency of life. I remember the moment like it was etched into my soul. I was standing in the freezing rain, utterly soaked, heart racing, holding a torn grocery bag filled with what little food I could afford that week. Behind me, a voice, a man I'd never met, shouted, "Hey, wait!" I turned around, expecting trouble. Instead, he handed me a dry umbrella and a smile warmer than the sun. "You looked like you could use this more than I can," he said before walking away without asking for anything in return. That day changed me, not because of the umbrella, but because someone saw my struggle, paused their own life, and chose kindness. And what hit me later, harder than the cold, was this. That act of kindness cost him nothing, yet it gave me everything. That's the power of what we're about to explore together. This isn't just another motivational video. This is a deep dive into one of the most misunderstood truths of life. One that ancient Stoics knew well but that modern society has tragically forgotten. Kindness is the ultimate currency of life. Stick with me, because I promise you by the end of this, you'll see your relationships, your struggles, and even your enemies through a lens so powerful, it could actually change how you live forever. I'll show you how real Stoics, yes, even warriors like Marcus Aurelius, believed kindness wasn't weakness, but a form of invincible strength. And I'll prove it with stories that hit hard, challenges that confront your deepest instincts, and insights that no other channel dares to unpack. So let's get into it. Picture this. You wake up late. You're rushing to work. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Your first instinct? Anger. You grip the wheel. You mutter something under your breath. Maybe worse. But what if I told you that reaction is costing you far more than you realize? That every moment we choose rage over reason, vengeance over virtue, we're trading away our inner peace for an emotional currency that always leaves us bankrupt? That's where Stoicism slaps you in the face. In the best way. Epictetus, a man who was born a slave and rose to become one of the most powerful philosophers in Rome, once said, "You always have a choice. You can always choose kindness, even when you're hurting, especially when you're hurting. Because that's when kindness becomes transformational." Let me ask you something. When was the last time you responded to cruelty with compassion? Not out of weakness, but from sheer power? I'll never forget what happened to my friend Sarah. She was working in a toxic office where her boss constantly belittled her. Most people would have quit, some might have snapped, but she did something different. She baked cookies. Yes, seriously, she brought cookies to work. For the boss. At first, people thought she was insane. But over time, that boss softened, apologized, changed. Why? Because kindness does something to people. It disarms them. It makes them look inward. It changes the battlefield. The Stoics believed the only true enemy is the chaos within us. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." In other words, be the antidote, not the reflection. So here's your challenge. This week, pick someone who doesn't deserve your kindness. Someone who irritates you, frustrates you, maybe even hurt you, and give them your kindness anyway. Why? Because every act of kindness is a seed planted in the soil of your own character. And trust me, your future self will reap a harvest of peace, strength, and clarity. Now, here's where it gets deeper. At the 3-minute mark, I told you we'd hit a philosophical moment, and here it is. Kindness isn't about others, it's about you. It's not about being liked, it's about becoming unshakable. Think about it. Anyone can be kind when life is good. But only the truly powerful can be kind when everything's falling apart. Let me tell you about a man named James. He lost his daughter in a tragic accident. Months later, he met the drunk driver who killed her. In court, with tears in his eyes, he forgave him. Why? Because James understood something we all forget. Anger chains us to the past. Kindness frees us to move forward. I want you to imagine the strength it takes to look your greatest pain in the face and say, "You will not define me. I choose love instead." That's not weakness. That's Stoicism in action. Because at its core, Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about transcending it. It's about taking control, owning your mind, owning your heart. So ask yourself right now, who am I still holding resentment against? What revenge fantasy is quietly stealing my peace? And more importantly, what would it feel like to let it go? To choose kindness, not for them, but for you? That's why I say kindness is the ultimate currency. Because while money comes and goes, the dividends of compassion echo through generations. You may not change the world with one act, but you'll change your world. And that's where real revolutions begin. Ready to go even deeper? He tried to destroy me. Here's why I helped him instead. There was a guy named Brandon. He hated me. I don't say that lightly. I mean full-on, vicious, unrelenting hate. Every time I posted something online, he'd leave comments tearing me down. He made videos mocking me. He even sent threats. I could have fought back. I almost did. But then I remembered something Seneca wrote. How much better to heal than to seek revenge from injury. Vengeance wastes a life. It is its own punishment. So, I did something completely insane. I messaged him. Not to argue, not to defend myself. I just said, "Hey, man, I can't imagine what you're going through that's making you feel like this. If you ever need to talk, I'm here." There was silence for a week. Then, he replied. He told me his story, his depression, his loneliness, how he envied my life, how his anger wasn't really about me. It was about the pain he didn't know how to process. We talked for hours. We're friends now. Let that sink in. One of my worst enemies became one of my closest allies. Not because I won, but because I chose not to play the game. That's what Stoicism teaches us. That you can be powerful without needing to overpower. That the highest form of strength is the ability to stay soft when the world tries to harden you. And that, my friend, is where the game of life changes. Because the more you practice kindness, especially when it's hard, the more you become immune to external chaos. Your peace no longer depends on how people treat you, but on how you choose to respond. Let's zoom out for a second. We live in a world where cruelty is normalized, where social media rewards outrage, where kindness is seen as naive. But I'll tell you this, the Stoics would rather be seen as fools than live without virtue. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, lost everything in a shipwreck. He wandered into Athens with nothing. And yet he built a philosophy so powerful it still shapes lives 2,000 years later. How? Because he chose character over circumstance. And the cornerstone of character is kindness. Now I want to challenge your instincts. Let's say someone humiliates you publicly. You're furious, everyone's watching, you want to strike back. Your pride demands it. But what if you did the opposite? What if you smiled and walked away? Or even crazier, what if you thanked them? Not sarcastically, genuinely. Because their cruelty gave you a chance to practice self-control, forgiveness, and peace. Sounds impossible, right? But that's where the real growth happens. Every conflict is a test, and the prize isn't dominance, it's freedom. Freedom from ego. Freedom from reactivity. Freedom from being controlled by anything outside of your soul. Let me bring you into another story. My uncle was a prison counselor. He worked with men who'd committed unimaginable crimes. One day, he asked the most violent inmate, "What would have changed your life when you were 10? The man paused, then said, "One person, just one, who believed I was worth loving." That line broke me. Because that's what we forget. Kindness isn't weakness, it's rescue. Every person you meet is fighting an invisible war. Some are losing, some are screaming for help in the only way they know, through anger, sarcasm, or withdrawal. And we get to choose. Do we throw gasoline on their fire? Or water? The Stoics would say, Let your virtue be the mirror in which others see themselves clearly. Kindness makes people look inward. It breaks the illusion that power means control. It reveals the truth. Real power is influence without force. So here's the brutal question. When someone wrongs you, what do they awaken in you? The animal, or the philosopher? Because that's the ultimate Stoic goal, not to suppress what's human, but to elevate it. To rise above. To be kind when it costs you everything. Because in that moment, you become untouchable. What a homeless philosopher taught me about power I'll never forget. 3 years ago, I met a man named Eli under a highway bridge. He was homeless, ragged clothes, rough voice, but his eyes were sharp, focused, stoic. I gave him a meal. We talked. And what he told me that night shook me. He said, "You think I'm poor, but I'm richer than most of the people in those suits who walk by me every day. Because I know what I need, and it's not more things. It's peace, and peace comes from kindness." I asked him where he learned that. He laughed. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, they're my teachers. This man, without a roof over his head, was quoting Stoic wisdom more fluently than half the philosophers I've seen on YouTube. And the truth he gave me was so pure, it burned into my brain. Kindness, he said, is the only wealth that multiplies every time you give it away. It was in that moment I realized, Eli had nothing, and yet, he gave me something priceless. Perspective. And perspective is what Stoicism is all about. It's the superpower that lets us take life's worst, and turn it into fuel for becoming our best. Let's be honest. The world is loud, distracting, ruthless. People are obsessed with hustling, winning, proving themselves, but in all that noise, we forget what actually gives our lives meaning. It's not clout. It's not conquest. It's connection. Think of the best moments in your life. I'd bet anything they weren't when you won an argument, made $1 million, or got more likes than someone else. They were when you connected with someone who saw you, heard you, loved you. That's what kindness creates, and that's why it's the ultimate currency. Because unlike money, you can't counterfeit kindness. It's felt, it's remembered, it's immortal. Now here's the twist. Kindness doesn't always look like being soft. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is tell the truth no one else will. Sometimes, it means holding the mirror up to someone who's destroying themselves. Sometimes, it means walking away from toxicity, not out of hate, but love for yourself. That's where Stoicism balances us. It reminds us, kindness must be paired with wisdom, otherwise, it becomes enabling, weak, misguided. True Stoic kindness is fierce. It's saying no with love. It's setting boundaries with grace. It's having the courage to be misunderstood, because your integrity matters more than your image. Let me tell you about Jenna. She was in a relationship for 5 years. Toxic, manipulative. Every time she tried to leave, he'd guilt her, cry, promise to change. And every time, she stayed. Until one day, she read a quote by Epictetus: "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." And it clicked. Her staying wasn't just about him. It was about her belief that kindness meant self-sacrifice. That day, she left. With peace, with clarity, with strength. And you know what? She sent him a letter. Not to attack, not to justify, but to wish him healing. That's kindness with backbone. And that's what I want you to feel right now. Kindness isn't passive. It's the active choice to elevate your soul above your circumstances. Every single day, life will give you reasons to become bitter, defensive, guarded. But if you can meet those moments with calm, compassion, and clarity, you become someone unstoppable. You become stoic in the truest sense. And don't think the world won't notice. People are starving for examples of real goodness. The kind that isn't flashy or performative, but authentic, quiet, radiant. Be that person. Be the one who listens when everyone else talks. Who forgives when it's not deserved. Who helps when it's not convenient. Because those acts, they echo. You'll never know how many lives you change just by being a little softer in a world made hard. Now I want to end with something radical. A challenge. This week, I want you to do something kind, for someone who will never know it was you. No credit, no praise. Just pure kindness. Maybe it's leaving a $20 bill in a struggling family's mailbox. Maybe it's buying groceries for someone behind you in line and walking away before they notice. Maybe it's writing a letter of encouragement and leaving it on a stranger's car. Why? Because when you do good without needing recognition, you free yourself from ego. You train your soul to act from virtue, not vanity. And that is Stoicism. That's the currency that buys you freedom, joy, and peace no matter what the world throws at you. So let's leave with this. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more stillness. More calm. More people who are brave enough to be kind, even when it's not easy. That's the mark of a true Stoic. And that, my friend, is why kindness is the ultimate currency of life. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. Now go. Be the one. Because the world is watching. And your next act of kindness might just change everything.